Today's story is so raw and gripping it feels almost too real. Set in the harsh silence of the Old West, where the line between law and corruption was razor thin. This was a land where an Apache man could be hunted on a lie, and a woman could lose her home for refusing to bow. It all started with a single act of compassion, something simple, human, and dangerous enough to reshape two lives forever. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The Arizona sun stretched long, tired shadows across the cracked earth as Mara Whitlock stepped onto the front porch of her family's ranch house. At 32, faint lines had settled around her eyes and mouth, marks left by years of labor, drought, and solitude. But her gaze remained steady, sharp with the same resolve she had carried since girlhood. She brushed a loose strand of dark chestnut hair from her face and looked out over the land that had been, at different times, both her refuge and her cage. 2 decades had passed since the night that reshaped her life. In the quiet moments before dawn, Mara could still hear it, the shallow, broken breathing of the wounded Apache boy her father had carried home. Barely alive, blood soaking through his clothes from a gunshot wound. She had been 12 then, frightened yet drawn forward, watching from the cellar steps as her parents fought to save a child the world had already decided to discard. "Mara," her mother whispered, motioning her closer. "Bring me more clean cloth." It had been the first time she had ever seen someone from the tribe up close. The boy couldn't have been more than 14. Fever burned in his dark eyes, fear held tightly behind a rigid, unyielding jaw. What stayed with her was not how different he was, but how young, how fragile he looked beneath that forced stillness. For 3 long weeks, they hid him in the root cellar, nursing him back from the edge of death, while her father told the town they were tending to a private illness. It was a dangerous lie. Tensions between settlers and the Apache had reached a breaking point, violence flaring across the territory like sudden summer storms. "Why are we helping him, Pa?" Mara asked one night as they replaced the boy's bandages. Her father, Thaddeus Whitlock, met her gaze with calm certainty. "Because before we're white or Apache, American or anything else," he said quietly, "we're human. And that matters more than any line drawn on a map." The boy spoke little as he healed, but his eyes followed Mara whenever she brought water or food. She taught him a handful of English words. In return, he showed her how to weave a small basket from reeds along the creek. They spoke with gestures, half-formed phrases, building a fragile bridge between 2 worlds that rarely met without bloodshed. On the night before he left, strong enough to return to his people, he took her hand in the darkness of the cellar. "My name is Kesh," he said in careful English. "I will not forget. One day I come back." Mara nodded, not yet understanding the weight carried in those words. "I'm Mara," she replied softly. He pressed something into her palm, a small stone eagle, smooth and worn. "To remember," he said. "A promise." By morning he was gone, dissolving into the desert like mist beneath the rising sun. Now, 20 years later, Mara still carried that stone eagle in her pocket each morning as she surveyed her land. Her parents were long buried, her father claimed by pneumonia 8 years earlier, her mother following only months later, as though unwilling to remain in a world without him. The ranch became Mara's burden alone, an unmarried woman in a territory where solitude invited suspicion. And worse. She endured drought, loss, and the persistent pressure of neighboring rancher Barrett Holloway, along with the whispers from Dustfall folk who found her independence unsettling. The ranch wasn't thriving, but it was hers, and she guarded it with the same quiet resolve her father once had. "Miss Whitlock," a voice called from the barn. Rourke Maddox, the aging cowhand who had worked for her father and stayed on after his passing, pointed toward the horizon. Mara squinted into the glare, spotting a lone rider moving along the dusty road that linked the ranch to the main trail. Visitors were rarely welcome. Instinct pulled her hand toward the rifle beside the door. "Want me to turn him around?" Rourke asked, already shifting toward his gun. "No," Mara said, something about the rider's shape tightening her chest. "I'll handle it." She stepped off the porch, rifle held low but ready, walking toward the boundary fence. The rider approached slowly, deliberately, giving her time to study him. He sat tall in the saddle, shoulders broad against the open sky. He wore a blend of settler clothes and Apache craft, plain trousers, a loose shirt, and a vest worked with bead patterns. His long black hair was bound with a leather tie. As he drew closer, Mara felt her heartbeat rise. There was something familiar in the line of his jaw, in the way he looked at her. He stopped 20 paces away and dismounted with smooth, practiced ease. The man standing before her was in his mid-30s, skin weathered by sun and hardship. His dark eyes held hers without flinching. "Mara," he said, her childhood name spoken like a prayer. The rifle shook slightly in her hands. "No one calls me that anymore." "I do," he replied, stepping closer. "When you taught me words, when you brought me water in secret." Her breath caught. "Kesh." He nodded once, the faintest smile touching his mouth. "I kept my promise." Time folded in on itself. In his face, Mara saw the boy she once knew, now shaped into a man of quiet strength. Without thinking, she reached into her pocket and drew out the stone eagle. "I kept it," she whispered. His eyes softened. "And I returned." Behind her, Rourke approached cautiously, his hand hovering near his holster. "Miss Whitlock, everything all right?" Mara turned, steadying herself before answering. "Yes, Rourke. He's an old friend." She hesitated, then added, "Would you see to his horse, please?" Rourke Maddox paused, his eyes narrowing as they settled on the Apache man. The distrust was plain on his face. "It's fine," Mara said quietly. "Please." Reluctantly, Rourke took the reins and led Kesh's horse toward the barn. Mara remained where she was, facing the man who had stepped out of her past as if conjured by heat and memory. "Why now?" she asked softly. "After all these years?" Kesh's expression darkened, weighed down by time. "I have walked many roads since I left this place," he said. "I fought in wars I did not choose. I watched my people pushed farther and farther from their land." He paused, his gaze drifting across the ranch, the house, the fences, the creek winding through the dust. "But I never forgot the family who saved me when others would have let me die. I heard about your parents, that you were alone now." The ache returned instantly, tightening Mara's chest. "News travels," she said, "even beyond the frontier." "I have friends in many places," Kesh replied. "When I learned you were here by yourself, I knew it was time to keep my word." "And what word was that?" Mara asked. She was suddenly aware of how close he stood, of the charged silence between them. Kesh met her eyes, his voice low but unshaken. "To protect what once protected me." Later, the kitchen was warmed by the smell of fresh bread and strong coffee, as Mara set a steaming mug in front of him. Kesh sat in Thaddeus Whitlock's old chair, his presence filling the room in a way it never had before. Rourke had retreated to his cabin near the barn, only after Mara reassured him, more than once, that she was safe. "You've kept the house the same," Kesh observed, his eyes moving over the heavy beams, the stone hearth, the scarred wooden table where he had once learned how to eat with knife and fork. "Some things change," Mara said, sitting across from him. "Some things don't." She studied him openly now, the scars across his hands, the constant alertness that never quite left him. "You speak English well," she said. A faint smile crossed his lips. "I had a good teacher." 3 weeks of lessons from a 12-year-old hardly counts, she said dryly. "After I left, I spent time at a mission school," Kesh continued. "Later, I worked as a scout for the army." Something flickered across his face. Pain, perhaps. Regret. Mara frowned. "You scouted for the army? Against your own people?" His jaw tightened. The choices were few. Fight and die. Surrender and starve on a reservation, or find a way to walk between worlds. He held her gaze. "I chose the path that kept me alive, that allowed me to keep my promise." The weight of history settled between them. The brutal campaigns, the resistance of leaders like Cochise and Geronimo, the relentless push of settlers across Apache land. "And now?" Mara asked quietly. "What path do you walk now?" "My own," Kesh said. "I left the army 3 years ago. I live near the border. I trade, I hunt, I move between the white world and what remains of mine." Mara nodded. She understood what he did not say, that he belonged fully to neither side anymore. "And you," Kesh continued, his gaze softening. "You never married." Color crept into her cheeks. "No. There was the ranch. After my parents died." She hesitated. "I never met anyone worth changing my life for." Outside, the wind rose, rattling the shutters. The sun dipped low, burning red against the western mountains. "You should stay tonight," Mara said suddenly, surprising herself. "It's too late to ride anywhere else." Kesh studied her face for a long moment before nodding. "Thank you." As she prepared the small guest room, Mara tried to quiet the storm of emotions inside her. The boy she once knew had returned as a man. Calm, strong, and unsettling in ways she had never allowed herself to feel before. That night, she lay awake, listening to unfamiliar footsteps moving through her home. Through the thin walls, she could hear Kesh pacing the guest room, restless, just like her. Knowing he was just beyond the thin wall left Mara Whitlock caught between an unfamiliar comfort and a restless unease. Dawn arrived with the crowing of roosters and the pale wash of early light stretching across the eastern sky. Mara rose as she always did and stepped outside to find Kesh already at work, splitting firewood for the stove, each strike of the axe clean, measured, and sure. She lingered in the doorway, watching the steady roll of muscle beneath his shirt, the discipline in every controlled swing. When he sensed her presence and turned, their eyes met across the yard. Something passed between them, silent, charged, an understanding that ignored the years and the worlds that separated them. "You don't have to do that," she said, walking toward him. "I want to," Kesh replied, resting the axe against the stump. "While I'm here." The words carried an unspoken weight. "And how long is that?" Mara asked lightly, though her voice betrayed her. Before he could answer, the sound of hooves drew their attention toward the road. 3 riders appeared, moving with purpose towards the ranch. Mara recognized the man in front at once, Barrett Holloway, owner of the neighboring spread, a man whose interest in both her land and her life had never been subtle. "Trouble?" Kesh asked quietly, stepping closer to her side. "Possibly," Mara murmured. "Barrett Holloway? He's been trying to buy this place for years." Holloway pulled his horse to a stop, his eyes narrowing as they settled on Kesh. The 2 men riding with him, Holloway men by the look of them, shifted apart slightly, hands loose near their guns. It was a practiced show of pressure. "Morning, Miss Whitlock," Holloway called, tipping his hat with exaggerated politeness. "Didn't realize you had company." "Mr. Holloway," Mara replied evenly, What brings you out so early?" His gaze never left Kesh. "Just being neighborly. Heard you might be having trouble with your cattle. Thought I'd offer some help." The smile he wore never touched his eyes. "Seems you've already found assistance." "This is an old friend," Mara said, carefully leaving Kesh unnamed. "And my cattle are just fine." "Friend, is it?" Holloway drawled, the word sharpened into accusation. "Didn't know you kept company with Indians, Miss Whitlock." Kesh stood motionless beside her, his face unreadable. But Mara felt the tension in him. Tight. Ready. "I choose my own company, Mr. Holloway," she said coldly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to do." Holloway's jaw clenched. "Careful, Miss Whitlock. Folks around here remember what happened during the Apache raids. Wouldn't want anyone getting the wrong idea about your associations." The threat was unmistakable. "Good day, Mr. Holloway," Mara said, turning away. After one last look at Kesh, Holloway wheeled his horse and rode off, his men close behind. "He'll be trouble," Kesh said quietly, as they watched the riders disappear. Mara let out a slow breath. "He always is. He wants my water rights." "The creek," Kesh said. "It feeds his southern pasture." "And he wants you," he added, his voice calm, his eyes sharp. Mara looked up at him, surprised by his bluntness. "Yes," she admitted, "though not in a way that matters." Something dark flickered across his expression. "Men like him take what they want," Kesh said. "They don't ask." "I can handle Barrett Holloway," Mara replied, more firmly than she felt. Kesh studied her, then nodded. "I believe you can." He paused. "But you don't have to face him alone anymore." The words settled over her like warmth against a cold wind. For years she had stood by herself against pressure, threats, and quiet intimidation. The idea of someone standing beside her, seeing her strength rather than testing it, felt both strange and deeply comforting. "Why did you really come back, Kesh?" she asked at last. He was silent for a long moment, morning light reflected in his dark eyes. Then, slowly, he reached out and took her hand. The touch startled her. She didn't pull away. "In all the years since I left," he said softly, "in all the places I've walked, I never felt at home the way I did during those weeks here. With you." The truth of it struck her hard. In his eyes, she saw not only the memory of the wounded boy, but the man shaped by distance, survival, and choice. A man who had crossed deserts and decades to stand here again. Something shifted inside her then, subtle but unstoppable. Like the first tremor before the ground breaks, she understood that the life she had built around solitude was already changing. And in the days that followed, the rhythm of her world began to shift into something entirely new. Kesh slipped into the rhythm of the ranch with quiet purpose. He rode out with Rourke Maddox to check the cattle, mended stretches of fence long left wanting, and approached each chore with a perspective shaped by the land itself. He showed Mara Whitlock how to read the desert, to find water where settler eyes saw only dust, to follow signs so subtle they might as well have been invisible. He taught her which native plants soothed burns and fought infection, knowledge carried through generations of his people who had survived this country long before fences and deeds. In return, Mara shared the books she cherished, volumes of poetry and history her mother, Ellen Whitlock, had insisted on bringing west, believing civilization was not a place but a presence carried within. Evenings found them on the porch, Mara reading aloud while Kesh listened, occasionally asking questions that revealed a depth of thought, both unexpected and compelling. One such night, as the sky darkened to indigo and the first stars appeared, Mara caught herself watching his profile against the fading light, struck by how natural his presence had become. "You're staring," Kesh said without turning, amusement soft in his voice. Mara flushed, grateful for the cover of darkness. "I was just thinking how quickly people adapt to change." He turned then, thoughtful. "Is it change?" he asked, "or recognition?" "What do you mean?" "Sometimes," he said carefully, "what feels new is only something returning to where it belongs." The words lingered between them, heavy with meaning neither was ready to name. A coyote's call drifted across the open land, lonely and sharp. "Tell me about your life," Mara said suddenly. "The years between." Kesh was silent long enough that she thought he might refuse. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, deliberate, as though choosing each truth with care. "After I left here, I went back to my people. My father, Taeon, was already dead, killed in a clash with soldiers. My mother had taken my younger sister, Naira, to relatives near the Mexican border." He stared toward the horizon. "I was angry then, full of rage toward the white men who took so much from us, but not toward my family." "Not your family?" Mara echoed softly. "No," he agreed. "You showed me another way was possible. It made everything more complicated." He told her of the last free Apache bands, of learning to fight at a time when being a warrior meant almost certain death, of choosing to work as a scout for the army, a decision some of his people saw as betrayal, but one he made knowing adaptation was the only chance at survival. "I guided soldiers through lands my ancestors had known for centuries," he said, old pain threading his voice. "I showed them water, safe crossings. I never led them to camps where women and children would be harmed, though they doubted my loyalty." His hands tightened into fists against his knees. "I lived on the edge of a blade for years." Mara reached out without thinking, covering his hand with hers. "You survived," she said quietly. "You found a way." Kesh looked down at their hands, then slowly turned his palm upward, his fingers threading with hers. The simple touch sent warmth through Mara that had nothing to do with the lingering heat of the day. "And you?" he asked. "These years alone weren't easy," Mara replied with a faint smile. "But maybe they were necessary." After her parents died, there were those who believed she should sell the ranch, move into town, find a husband to manage her life. Frustration edged her voice. "As if I hadn't been helping run this place since I was 15. "Barrett Holloway," Kesh said. "Among others," she admitted. "He was the most persistent." She sighed. "When my father was alive, he respected the boundaries. First came offers to buy the land, then offers of protection, then hints that a woman alone might face misfortune if she refused help." Kesh's grip tightened. "He threatened you." "Never outright," Mara said. "He's too careful," but the meaning was clear. She lifted her chin. "So I learned to shoot straight, to ride fast, to make it known I'd defend what's mine." The respect in Kesh's eyes was unmistakable. "You are a warrior in your own way, Mara." Hearing her name from him sent a quiet shiver through her. "I did what I had to." "As did I," he replied. "Perhaps that's why we understand each other." Night settled fully around them, stars brightening across the vast Arizona sky. Neither moved to break the contact of their joined hands, as if that simple touch anchored them in a world that had tried more than once to sweep them aside. The following morning, Rourke Maddox rode in from town with supplies, and a grim look. "There's talk," he said to Mara, glancing uneasily toward Kesh, who was repairing a bridle nearby. "About your visitor." Mara straightened, catching the warning in his tone. "What kind of talk?" Rourke Maddox lowered his voice, casting a glance toward the yard. "Barrett Holloway's been running his mouth at the saloon. telling anyone who'll listen that you're hiding an Apache scout who turned on the army. Says the man's dangerous. Says it ain't right. A white woman alone with an Indian, he added quietly. Heat flared in Mara Whitlock's chest. My private affairs are none of Barrett Holloway's concern. No, ma'am, Rourke agreed. But folks listen to him. He's got pull. He hesitated, then continued. There's more. Holloway's been speaking with Sheriff Alden Cross, hinting there might be a warrant out for your friend, something about stolen army property. Cold settled in Mara's veins. That's nonsense. Maybe, Rourke said carefully. But it wouldn't be the first time false charges were used to get rid of an Indian when a powerful man wanted him gone. Later, after Rourke returned to the barn, Mara found Kesh by the corral. One look at his face told her he'd heard everything. You should leave, she said without preamble. It isn't safe for you here. Kesh kept working the bridle, his hands steady. I've lived with danger before. This is different, Mara insisted. Holloway has the ear of every important man in the county. If he wants charges made up, he'll get them. Kesh finally looked up. And if I go? He asked calmly. What happens to you? She faltered. You'll be alone again, he continued, with Holloway knowing he can drive away anyone who stands beside you. The truth landed hard. Holloway's move wasn't only about removing Kesh. It was about proving control over her land, her choices, her freedom. I won't be the reason harm comes to you, Mara said at last. Kesh set the bridle aside and stepped closer, near enough that she felt the warmth of him. That decision isn't yours alone. His voice was gentle, unyielding. I made a promise, Mara, to protect what once protected me. That was a boy's promise, she protested, made out of gratitude. And it still stands, he said, his dark eyes holding hers. Mara swallowed, unable to give shape to what was rising between them, something deeper than memory, stronger than caution. I'm not leaving, Kesh said quietly. Not unless you tell me you don't want me here. The moment stretched, tight with unsaid things. She knew what sense demanded. She knew the danger. But when she spoke, the words surprised even her. I want you to stay. Something softened in Kesh's expression, certainty settling in. Slowly, deliberately, he lifted his hand and brushed her cheek, barely a touch, reverent in its restraint. Then I stay, he said. Mara's heart pounded, her awareness sharpened by his closeness. For a breathless instant, she thought he might kiss her, and realized she wanted it with an intensity that stole her breath. Instead, he stepped back, his voice roughened. We need to prepare. Holloway won't stop at words. The spell broke. Mara nodded. We'll stay alert, rifles loaded. We'll take turns watching at night. Yes, Kesh agreed. And we move your cattle away from Holloway's boundary. Bring them closer to the house. They spent the rest of the day setting those plans in motion, working side by side with a new awareness humming between them. As the sun dipped low, painting the western sky in gold and fire, they stood together on a ridge overlooking the ranch, the house, the barn, the corral, the creek threading silver through the land. It's beautiful, Kesh said. It's home, Mara replied. After a pause, the words slipped out before she could stop them. It could be yours too. They hung between them, fragile and powerful. Kesh turned toward her, his face unreadable in the fading light. Mara! The crack of a rifle shattered the stillness. Dirt exploded at their feet. In an instant, Kesh dragged Mara behind a boulder, his body shielding hers as a second shot splintered bark from a nearby tree. South Ridge, he said calmly. Single shooter, from the spacing. Warning shots, Mara said grimly. Holloway's way of reminding us he's watching. Can you make it to the house if I cover you? Kesh asked, already reaching for his pistol. Mara caught his wrist. We go together. His look held both frustration and respect. On 3, he said. Stay low. Move fast. They reached the house without another shot fired, but the warning had been made clear. A line had been crossed. As Mara barred the door behind them, she felt a cold certainty settle in her chest. The fragile calm of the past days was already breaking apart. Rain fell hard in the night, a rare mercy in the Arizona desert. It hammered against the roof, turning the dust outside into dark, shining earth. Mara sat at the kitchen window with a rifle resting across her knees, keeping watch as silver sheets of rain slid down the glass. Kesh entered without a sound, carrying a cup of coffee. He set it in front of her, their fingers brushing briefly. She accepted it with a quiet nod. All quiet? He asked, taking the chair across from her. So far, Mara said. Not even a coyote moving in weather like this. Kesh glanced toward the window. Rain hides tracks, he said, and it makes it harder for anyone to come close without being heard. The practical truth of it reminded Mara why they were on guard at all. Danger brought on by his presence. And still, she felt no regret. Not even now. What will you do? She asked suddenly. When this is finished? Kesh looked at her, his expression thoughtful. That depends. On what? On you, he said simply. On what you want. The honesty of it unsettled her. For years, she had taught herself not to want. Desire was a luxury she couldn't afford when survival came first. I don't know what I want, she admitted. The words felt like weight lifting from her chest. For so long it was only about keeping the ranch, honoring my parents. I never thought beyond that. And now? Kesh asked gently. Mara set the cup aside, her hands unsteady. Now I find myself thinking of things that shouldn't be possible. Nothing is impossible, Kesh said, leaning forward. Only difficult. The rain intensified, drumming louder, wrapping the house in a cocoon of sound. Beyond the walls, the world felt distant. There was only the table between them, the lamplight, and the truths they had avoided too long. If I were to stay, Kesh continued quietly, if we tried to build something here together, it would not be easy. There are those who would never accept it. So I've never chosen the easy road, Mara said, meeting his gaze. Not once. A faint smile touched his mouth. No. He hesitated, something unguarded flickering in his eyes. That's one of the things I admire about you. The word he didn't say lingered between them, heavy and undeniable. Love. When I was a boy here, Kesh said after a moment, his voice taking on the rhythm of memory. Your mother showed me a flower that blooms in the desert after rain. Small. Easy to miss. She said beauty always finds a way, even in the harshest places. His eyes held Mara's. What grows between us is like that flower, unlikely, strong enough to break stone. Emotion tightened her throat. Kesh. The sound of horses cut through the rain-soaked night. Many of them. Moving fast. In an instant, the moment shattered. Kesh was on his feet, gliding to the window with practiced ease. 6 riders, he said grimly, armed. Mara seized her rifle, checking the chamber. Barrett Holloway wouldn't come himself. He'd send others. Get Rourke Maddox, Kesh said. We'll need every gun. Rourke was already awake, drawn by the noise. They took their positions, Rourke at the back door, Mara at the front window, Kesh along the side wall where he could shift as needed. The riders pulled into the yard, shapes blurred by rain and darkness. One man dismounted and strode toward the house with the confidence of authority. That's Sheriff Alden Cross, Mara said, recognizing the hat and badge even through the downpour. Holloway's already reached him. A sharp knock struck the door. "Miss Whitlock," the sheriff called. "This is Sheriff Alden Cross. I need to speak with you now." Mara exchanged a look with Kesh. He nodded once and melted back into the shadows. She opened the door only a few inches, rifle still in hand. "Sheriff," she said coolly, "it's a late hour for a visit." Cross stood on the porch, rain streaming from the brim of his hat, his mustache darkened with wet. Behind him, Cross deputies remained mounted, hands resting close to their weapons. "This isn't a visit," Cross said. "I have reason to believe you're harboring a fugitive, an Apache by the name of Kesh, wanted for theft of Army property and suspected of passing information to hostile bands." "That's absurd," Mara Whitlock said, forcing her voice to stay level. "Who's making these claims?" "That doesn't matter," Sheriff Alden Cross replied. "I've got a duty to look into it. I'll need to search your property." "Do you have a warrant?" Mara shot back. Cross's eyes hardened. "I don't need one when I'm pursuing a dangerous fugitive. Step aside, Miss Whitlock. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Mara didn't move. "No, Sheriff. You won't enter my home on rumors and false charges, not without lawful authority. If you have accusations, file them properly. Until then, we're done here." Anger creased Cross's face. He leaned forward, peering past her into the house. "You're making a serious mistake. Is he in there? Is he really worth risking everything for?" "Good night, Sheriff," Mara said, starting to close the door. Cross shoved his hand against it, stopping the door cold. "Listen to me. Barrett Holloway isn't a man you want as an enemy. He's already spreading talk, saying your Apache friend might have been tied to those raids years back, the ones where the Miller family was killed." His voice dropped. "People around here don't forget." From the shadows behind her, Kesh stepped forward, fully visible now. "Your threat is understood, lawman," he said calmly, steel beneath the words. "Leave now, while you can still do so with dignity." Cross's hand twitched toward his revolver, then froze. From the rear of the house, Rourke Maddox emerged, rifle leveled squarely at the sheriff's chest. Cross exhaled slowly. "3 guns against 6, he said, regaining his composure. "Those aren't odds I'd take." "Good thing no one's asking you to gamble," Mara replied coldly. "Leave my property, now." Rain streamed from Cross's hat as he hesitated. Then, with a short nod, he stepped back. "This isn't over," he warned. "Not even close." When the riders vanished into the rain, Mara barred the door, her hands shaking as the tension drained away. "That was brave," Kesh said quietly. "Or foolish," Rourke muttered, lowering his rifle. "Holloway won't stop now. Neither will Cross." "No," Mara said, turning to face them both. "This is only the beginning." Rain fell through the night and into the gray morning, as though the sky itself mourned what lay ahead. None of them slept. They rotated watches, listening, waiting. By mid-morning the storm passed, leaving the land scrubbed clean and unnervingly silent. It was Kesh who spotted the riders first, approaching from the east, not the road to town, but the open country beyond. He counted them through the glass. 5 men, moving with purpose. Not Holloway's riders, different horses, different seat. Rourke joined him at the window, squinting. "Army," he said grimly. "Cavalry mounts." Mara's heart dropped. If the army was involved, matters had gone far beyond threats and rumors. "How would they know to come here?" she asked. "Holloway," Kesh replied, his jaw tightening. "He's called in every favor he has." There was no pretense this time. Soldiers surrounded the house. Their lieutenant, a young man whose face carried more wear than his years, dismounted and approached with the authority of uniform and orders. "By command of Colonel Barrett Ridgway, Fort Grant," he announced when Mara opened the door. "I am here to apprehend the Apache scout known as Kesh, wanted for desertion and theft of military property." There are no deserters here, Mara said, fighting to keep her composure. Only a free man who completed his service years ago. The lieutenant's expression didn't change. My orders are clear, ma'am. Step aside. Before Mara could answer, Kesh moved to her side. I'll go with you, he said quietly. There's no need for violence. No, Mara protested, turning to him. You can't. His eyes held hers, steady, resolute. It's the only way to keep you safe. I won't have blood spilled on your land because of me. This is a lie, Mara said, anger and fear shaking her voice. These charges were made up by Barrett Holloway. She turned back to the officer. You're being used for a land grab. Something flickered in the lieutenant's eyes. Doubt, perhaps, but duty won out. My orders stand. Kesh placed a gentle hand on Mara's shoulder. It will be all right, Kesh said quietly, though they both knew the words rang hollow. I've faced worse than lies dressed as law. I'm going with you, Mara Whitlock said at once. The decision settled in her mind with sharp, unmistakable clarity. I'll speak directly to Colonel Barrett Ridgway myself. Mara, Rourke Maddox began, concern etched deep into his weathered face. You stay here, she told him firmly. Watch the ranch. Keep it safe. I'll come back as soon as I can. The ride to Fort Grant passed in tight, watchful silence. Mara and Kesh rode between armed soldiers, their hands never straying far from their weapons. Kesh held himself upright, proud despite the chains of accusation hanging over him. Now and then, his gaze met Mara's across the distance, offering a quiet reassurance she clung to more than she dared admit. Fort Grant rose from the desert like a declaration of control over the wild, wooden structures aligned with military precision, the flag snapping above headquarters. As they entered through the gates, Mara felt the weight of every stare. A white woman riding beside an Apache prisoner unsettled the rigid order of their world. Colonel Barrett Ridgway was a man past middle age, silver threading his hair, his uniform immaculate. He received Mara with practiced courtesy, his eyes sharp and unreadable. Miss Whitlock, he said, indicating a chair. Lieutenant Mason Ives informs me you wish to speak regarding the Apache detainee. His name is Kesh, Mara replied evenly, and he is neither a deserter nor a thief. He completed his service honorably years ago. Ridgway's expression did not shift. We have information suggesting otherwise. From Barrett Holloway, no doubt, Mara countered. A man determined to remove Kesh from my land so he can force me to sell. For the briefest moment, surprise flickered across the colonel's face. Mr. Holloway did bring certain matters to our attention, Ridgway admitted. But these are serious accusations, Miss Whitlock. Then show me the proof, Mara said sharply. Show me records of what was supposedly stolen. Show me anything that supports these claims. Ridgway studied her in silence, fingers tapping softly against his desk. You seem deeply invested in this man's fate. The implication was clear. Heat rose to Mara's face, not from shame, but anger. I'm invested in justice, she said. My family saved Kesh's life when he was a boy. He returned to honor that debt, nothing more. It was a lie, and Ridgway knew it. But protocol spared him from challenging it outright. This matter will proceed under military review, he said carefully. If Kesh is innocent, he has nothing to fear. They both knew how untrue that was. Where is he now? Mara asked. In the stockade. He will remain there until the investigation concludes. I want to see him. Ridgway raised an eyebrow. That would be irregular. So is arresting a man on fabricated charges to please a powerful landowner, Mara replied. I insist. After a long pause, Ridgway nodded once. 5 minutes. Under guard. The stockade stood at the far edge of the fort, dark, reinforced, unforgiving. Inside, the air was heavy with neglect and hopelessness. Kesh sat on a narrow cot in the last cell, posture straight, composure intact. When he saw Mara, something softened in his eyes, gone as quickly as it appeared. 5 minutes, the guard barked. Mara stepped close to the bars. This is wrong. All of it. Many things in this world are wrong, Kesh replied calmly. This is only one more. I'll prove your innocence, she vowed. I'll go to the territorial governor if I must. Kesh shook his head slightly. Holloway planned this well. Even if the charges fall apart, I'll be kept here long enough for him to squeeze you. Your land, your standing, the town itself. The truth of it struck her hard. Then what? She asked quietly. We just let him win? Kesh stepped closer, lowering his voice. No, we change the board. His eyes locked onto hers. There's a man in Tucson, Silas Vorn. He was a captain when I scouted for the army. He knows the truth about my service, Kesh said quietly. He has the records to prove it. I'll find him, Mara Whitlock answered at once. I promise. There's more, Kesh went on. Barrett Holloway isn't only after your land. There are rumors. Silver on the eastern ridge. Your eastern ridge. That's why he's grown desperate. Mara's eyes widened. Silver? Are you certain? No, Kesh replied, but it explains too much to ignore. He glanced toward the guard, who was shifting his weight, impatience written on his face. Be careful, Mara. Holloway will be watching every step you take. Time's up, the guard snapped, moving closer. Without thinking, Mara reached through the bars, her fingers brushing Kesh's cheek in a tender, unguarded touch. There was no denying it now. I will come back for you, she said fiercely. I swear it. Something lit in Kesh's eyes. Hope, or something deeper he rarely allowed himself to show. I know, he said softly. Some promises endure, even across years. The ride back to the ranch was a lonely one. The familiar land felt suddenly treacherous, every ridge and trail holding new meaning. Mara's thoughts raced, plans forming, risks weighing heavy as the truth sharpened into focus. Rourke Maddox was waiting when she returned, relief softening his worried face when he saw her unharmed. They're holding him at the fort, she said, dismounting stiffly. False charges, but that hardly matters. It's Holloway's play. Isolate me. Make me vulnerable. Rourke nodded grimly. So what now, Miss Whitlock? Mara straightened, resolve settling hard within her. Now, Rourke, we push back, every way we can. The days that followed blurred into relentless motion. Mara rode to Tucson and found Silas Vorn exactly where Kesh had said. Retired, running a modest law practice. The aging officer remembered Kesh clearly. Best scout I ever had, Vorn said, paging through old journals. Honest, loyal, saved my life twice. He looked up sharply. These charges? Absolute nonsense. Kesh completed his service cleanly. I've got the discharge papers. Will you testify? Mara asked. Vorn hesitated. Going against the army, even now, isn't simple, and if Barrett Holloway is involved, he sighed. But yes, I will. Truth still matters. Armed with affidavits and copied records, Mara sought out Nolan Price, a mining engineer who owed her father, Thaddeus Whitlock, a favor. For a modest fee and strict discretion, Price surveyed the eastern ridge. 3 days later, dust still clinging to him, he confirmed it. There's silver. Not a fortune, but enough to explain Holloway's interest. Meanwhile, Rourke quietly worked the town. He learned Holloway had taken on heavy debt from Eastern investors, debts a silver find could erase overnight. The pieces aligned. Holloway's scheme stood exposed, but knowing the truth and proving it, freeing Kesh, were very different battles. Returning from a fruitless meeting with Marshal Edwin Croft, whose promises amounted to little more than delay, Mara found her path blocked. Barrett Holloway waited astride his horse, alone for once, a smug smile curving as she approached. "Miss Whitlock," he drawled, tipping his hat. "You've been busy. Tucson trips, mining men. Looks suspicious." Mara reined in, keeping her distance. "My affairs are none of your concern." "Oh, but they are," Holloway replied smoothly, "especially when they interfere with lawful proceedings against a dangerous fugitive." "There's nothing lawful about the charges against Kesh," Mara said coldly, "and you know it." Holloway's smile faded, calculation replacing charm. "What I know is this. You're trapped. Your Apache friend stays locked up. Your ranch is struggling. I've seen your fences, your cattle. One bad season from collapse." "So this was all worth it?" Mara challenged. "False charges, army pressure, town gossip, all for my land?" A flicker of surprise crossed his face, gone in an instant. "I'm only pointing out reality. I'm still offering a fair price, generous given the circumstances." "And if I refuse?" His eyes hardened. "Then you'll stand alone, Miss Whitlock. No Apache protector, no friendly dustfall folk. Just you, and what's left when the pressure finishes its work." Not even Rourke Maddox, once he realizes he's hitched his wagon to a losing cause. Barrett Holloway leaned forward in his saddle. "How long do you think you can hold out? A month? 2? Winter's coming. Be ashamed to face it without resources. Or friends." The threat was plain. Yet instead of fear, a cold clarity settled over Mara Whitlock. In that instant, she saw Holloway for what he truly was, not an untouchable force, but a desperate man overreaching, taking risks that exposed his own weak seams. "I think we're finished here, Mr. Holloway," she said calmly, gathering her reins. "I suggest you move aside." Holloway's face flushed. "This is your last chance, Mara. Take my offer, or face the consequences." "I've faced consequences all my life," she replied, nudging her horse forward. "Yours don't frighten me." As she rode past, he called after her, his voice tight with fury. "You'll regret this decision, I promise." Mara didn't look back. There was work to be done, a plan to carry through, and a promise of her own to keep. The opening came 3 days later, when Colonel Barrett Ridgway agreed to meet with Silas Vaughan to review the evidence surrounding Kesh's service record. Drawing on connections her father, Thaddeus Whitlock, had forged years earlier, Mara also ensured Marshal Edwin Croft would attend, a neutral presence in proceedings that might otherwise tilt beneath military habit and old prejudice. The meeting was tense. Vaughan's clear documentation and plain-spoken testimony stood in sharp contrast to the vague, second-hand claims underpinning the charges against Kesh. As the discussion unfolded, it became unmistakable that the case rested on little more than Holloway's word, and the Army's readiness to accept it without scrutiny. "This is troubling," the Marshal said, studying the discharge papers Vaughan produced. "Very troubling indeed. It appears a grave injustice may have been set in motion." To his credit, Ridgway looked genuinely unsettled. "I was unaware of Captain Vaughan's records," he admitted. "Mr. Holloway's accusations seemed credible, given his standing in the community. And given that the accused is Apache," Mara added pointedly. Ridgway had the grace to look uncomfortable. "The situation is complex, Miss Whitlock." "No," she corrected, steady and clear. "It's simple. An innocent man is being held on false charges, and the man who engineered them stands to profit from his confinement." She laid out what they had uncovered: the silver on the eastern ridge, Holloway's mounting debts, his escalating pressure to force a sale. By the meeting's end, Ridgway agreed to release Kesh pending a formal review. A face-saving step everyone understood would lead to dismissal. Disturbed by the stench of corruption, the Marshal pledged a deeper inquiry into Holloway's dealings. Near sunset, Kesh walked out through the fort gates, free for the first time in weeks. Mara waited with the horses, her heart lifting at the sight of him. Thinner, perhaps, his face more sharply drawn but unbowed, his eyes finding hers at once across the dusty yard. No words were needed. He took her hand, a quiet gesture that said everything. "Let's go home," Mara said softly. The word lingered between them. Home, with all it promised. Kesh's fingers tightened around hers. "Yes," he said simply. Home. They rode side by side as the first stars pricked the eastern sky, the Arizona expanse opening before them like a promise waiting to be kept. The trials ahead remained formidable. Holloway's defeat was not complete. The world's prejudices still stood. Their path would never be easy. Yet in that moment, truth restored, trust reclaimed, something deeper binding them. The future felt less a burden than a horizon. As the ranch house lights came into view, Kesh reached into his pocket and drew out the small carved stone eagle. The one Mara had kept all those years and returned to him before his arrest. "In my people's beliefs," he said, voice low in the gathering dark, "eagles carry messages between earth and sky, between the living world and what lies beyond." He placed the carving in his open palm, offering it back. "This carried our promise across years and miles. Now it will watch over what we build." Mara took the eagle, then caught his hand before he could withdraw it, her fingers threading with his. An ancient joining, a shared fate. "What we build," she echoed, certain. "Together." Ahead, the house waited, windows warm with welcome. And as they rode toward it, side by side, Mara knew that whatever battles still lay ahead, they would meet them as they were always meant to. Not as savior and saved, not as debtor and creditor, but as equals, bound by a love that began in childhood compassion and matured into something as enduring as the desert itself. The story of the wounded Apache boy and the girl who helped save him had come full circle. And now, beneath the vast sky, a new story was beginning, one they would write together. The Arizona sky that had once borne witness to their separation now seemed to bless their reunion. In the end, it was not merely a promise that had been honored, but a destiny fully realized. Two souls had found in one another the home they had always searched for, in a land that demanded courage, in a time that required defiance, in a love that crossed every line meant to divide. Spring arrived early that year, spilling wildflowers across the desert in a rare and generous bloom. On the Whitlock Ranch, as some now quietly called it, though official records still lagged behind lived truth, the creek ran high and steady, feeding ground long familiar with thirst. Mara Whitlock stood on the porch, watching as Kesh guided a small group of Red Mesa young through the art of tracking. The children, from Apache families who had slowly settled along the far edges of the land, mirrored his movements with solemn focus, learning skills that tied them back to memory and meaning. The settlement had grown carefully, step by step, after Barrett Holloway's fall. The investigation into Holloway's dealings uncovered more than the silver scheme. It revealed years of coercion and corruption that finally stripped him of the influence he once wielded. With his power broken, and with the quiet backing of Silas Vaughan, now serving as a territorial judge, a path had opened. Mara and Kesh had begun building something without precedent, a place where displaced Red Mesa kin could live with safety and dignity. It had not come easily. There were neighbors who resisted, threats from those who called cooperation betrayal. The local pastor refused to marry them, forcing the journey to Tucson, where a more progressive minister agreed to perform a ceremony many still whispered was unlawful. Even now, challenges surfaced daily. Suspicious looks in town, the occasional act of sabotage, the unspoken demand that they constantly justify their existence. Yet allies emerged as well. Rourke Maddox, steadfast to the end. Marshal Edwin Croft, impressed by their resolve. Even a young army officer, Lieutenant Mason Ives, the same man who had once arrested Kesh, now stopped by on occasion, bringing supplies and quiet updates, drawn by the idea that coexistence did not have to mean submission. Mara smiled as one of the children, a girl no older than 7, eyes bright with curiosity, found a track the others had missed, earning a nod from Kesh. Watching him with the child, Mara felt the full weight of what they had shaped together. Not only a home for themselves, but a refuge for others. A place where old wounds might finally begin to close. Kesh glanced up and caught her gaze across the yard. Even after months of marriage, the connection between them could still steal her breath. The recognition of a bond born of childhood mercy and grown into something as enduring as the land beneath their feet. He spoke quietly to the children, who scattered toward their homes with youthful energy, then crossed the yard to join her. Without a word, he took her hand, their fingers weaving together in the gesture that had become their shared language. "You're smiling," he observed, his own mouth lifting. "I was thinking about promises," Mara said. "The ones we keep, the ones we choose to make." Kesh's expression softened. Since his release, as their life had slowly taken shape, they had learned to read each other beyond words. "And what new promise is on your mind?" he asked gently. Mara turned fully toward him, taking both his hands. "I was thinking about the promise of new life," she said softly. "Of family." Kesh's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Mara," he breathed, voice unsteady. "Are you sure?" She nodded, joy and fear entwined in her chest. A child, their child, would face trials neither of them could fully prevent. The world was unkind to those who lived between boundaries. Yet boundaries shifted. The impossible sometimes bent under love, perseverance, and the radical act of living truthfully. "I'm certain," she said, "of this, of us, of everything we've built, and everything still ahead." Kesh drew her into his arms, holding her with a tenderness that still healed the quiet scars they both carried. Above them, the vast Arizona sky stretched on, witness to their defiance, their hope, their love. "Then we'll make this promise together," he murmured against her hair, "as we've made all the others." As the sun dipped toward the western mountains, casting long shadows over the land they had fought for and claimed, Mara closed her eyes and imagined the future, not as something to fear, but as a gift waiting to be lived. A future born from a promise made decades earlier by a wounded boy and a compassionate girl, neither of whom could have foreseen where that single act of kindness would lead. Some promises, once made, changed everything. Some loves, once found, could never be lost again. And some stories, even amid the harsh truths of the American West, found their way to endings that were not only happy, but deeply, defiantly just. In the gathering twilight, as the first stars appeared above their home, Mara Whitlock and Kesh stood together at the edge of that future, bound by promises kept and promises still unfolding. Their love stood as proof that even in a divided world, hearts could still find their way home. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Your presence means more than you know. If today's story awakened something inside you, don't let the trail end here. There are many more tales of courage, devotion, and faith waiting to be discovered. Subscribe, comment, share, and come back as we continue this unforgettable journey. Thank you, truly. Aviso legal. Disclaimer. All stories are intended solely for entertainment and may include fictionalized scenarios or dramatization derived from historical contexts. While AI assists in production, Human creators supervise and adjust every piece to maintain sincerity, credibility, and emotional quality. We adhere entirely to platform regulations regarding AI content, ensuring no deepfakes or misleading portrayals. Licensed materials are used responsibly. Republishing, modifying, or extracting content without authorization is not allowed. We appreciate every viewer who respects originality and creative effort.